Hello and welcome to another episode of Empathy at the Table. I'm your host, Tony Anagor, and today we are welcoming Greg Williams, the Master Negotiator and leading body language expert. He is an entrepreneur, he is a teacher, he's a mentor, and he has well over 30 years experience negotiating with corporate companies, with governmental bodies, and he's here to share his unique insights into how in real time we can negotiate well, but also keep a real good eye, a close eye on the data points that are being offered up to us by monitoring people's body language. This sounds like an exciting conversation. Look forward to seeing you on the other side at Empathy at the Table. Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. His name is Greg Williams, the Master Negotiator and Body Language Expert. Wow, we're in for a treat today. So, Greg, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome. Would you like to just start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and your interest in negotiation?
Oh, definitely. So, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Tony. That's number one. Number two, here's something that I'm going to do per you asking me to speak more about myself and how I became interested in negotiation. And that is, tell me specifically what you would like to know.
Well, the first question I actually have here is, you're down. I've done some research. Once you finally agreed, and let's say finally, because I've been chasing you for a while. Once you finally agreed, I did some research on you, and you're the full package. And I mean, you're an entrepreneur, an author, a trainer, renowned master negotiator. So I want to unpack this. What's the motivation? I mean, nobody wakes up at the age of like school age and decides, I want to become a master negotiator and a body language expert. So take us back. What's the motivation for you getting into this field?
Okay, now I'm going to highlight why I asked you the question, then I'm going to answer your question.
Okay,
In
great.
in a negotiation, you truly have to understand what someone is seeking from you such that you know specifically what to give to them, which is why I asked the question, tell me specifically what you're looking for, because believe me, I could have gone the whole gamut. Well, when I was 4 years old, I could have started from that particular point. But what really got me interested in negotiations is my true desire and need to help people improve the plights of their lives throughout the world. And I've spoken thus far in 19 countries. I grew up in a very impoverished environment, and I observed my mother, my grandmother, negotiate for everything. And unbeknownst to myself, when I was such a young age, did I realize I was picking up negotiation tactics and strategies just by observing them. And as I grew older, I honed those tactics, learned new tactics to employ in particular situations, observed what worked, and that was what led me to actually try to embolden others with the aspect that some people can't negotiate because they think they can't. Others think they're fantastic negotiators, and we are always somewhere in the middle of those boundaries. My perspective is I was a news contributor, TV news contributor at one point in time, and I was talking about the negotiation tactics and strategies people were using in the news, be they sports athletes, politicians, movie stars, yada, yada, yada. Then I was asked to discern what body language gestures they were emitting because body language plays a very important role in the negotiation process. I can say something along the lines of, that's my best deal. Now, for those that are viewing this, you may have seen me literally shaking my head, going, maybe not. Now, see, the body always wants to stay aligned with what the spoken word is conveying. And the body also wants to stay aligned with the truth as the person that's speaking those words believes it to be. And thus you can pick up on little cues. And again, it was the cues that I was discerning when I was on TV talking about, well, this person said one thing, but if you look at the reaction of their body, it conveys something else. And thus a lie becomes the truth to the degree someone believes it, but the body will say, no, it's still a lie. and the body will emit a signal to try to put itself back into a state of comfort in order to justify the lie that has been told. Those are the little cues that you pick up on that can give you insight about someone's inner mindset and thinking. And that was what led me to want to know more and more and more. Even when I was at Harvard, picking up negotiation skills and trainings and things of that nature, again, it was for the purpose of giving back to others so that others could improve their lives. That's the gist. That's the source of motivation that drives me.
Fantastic, fantastic. So when you study negotiation, study body language, it's all very well, reading the books and watching the videos, but then everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So what actually happens, and how do you train people to handle what happens when you're actually in a negotiation and the adrenaline's pumping and something happens that is totally unexpected, and you still got to stay focused on the body language and on what's actually going on? How do you train people in that area?
Well, two aspects. First of all, in your planning stage prior to the negotiation, you come up with scenarios to address the what if that might occur in the negotiation. And still, no matter how prepared you are, like you said, you get punched in the face and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada. So if something drastically, and I'm really placing a fine line on what you've planned, the contingencies you've built into the plan, and something happening outside of those contingencies, if it's minor, so for example, I expected you to react by leaning in when I said a particular thing. And yes, you can nuance a negotiation planning process to that degree. It's almost like it's scripted per what you expect to have happen during the talks. So, if it's something that's small, let it go. Ignore it. If it's something that's more drastic according to the plans that you've laid out and the path that the negotiation should be on per your plans, you literally call a timeout for whatever reason. And you also have built-in reasons that will allow you to exit the negotiation table at that particular moment in time such that you can regather your thoughts. Here's the reason why that's so important. If by chance you've created plans for the negotiation, and I also suggest that clients insert mile markers in their plans, meaning if you by chance think you're at 25% of the whole negotiation process, you're 25% in, and you expect to be at this particular point, if you are below that point, you need to assess, and you've already planned for how you're going to get the negotiation back on the path and track that will continue down the path towards success that you have planned it for. If by chance you're at the 50% mark and you're off that mark, okay, well, let me see now. I need to do something more drastic. Again, your contingency plans have already kicked in per the planning such that you can get back on track. Let's say you're at 75% into the negotiation and you are nowhere near the point that you thought you'd be at. That may be the time, depending upon the negotiation, to literally say something along the lines to the other negotiator. Well, just doesn't seem like we're going to reach a admirable conclusion. How about if we just table this until another time and then observe what happens with that other negotiator? Now, before you enter the negotiation why that individual or entity is dealing with you, what they expect from you, what they're going to do if they can't get from you what they seek, what they're going to do with the time frame that they have to accomplish the goals they are after also, so you therefore know where your leverage lies. If you're at the 75% point and you're nowhere near the goals that you wanted for the negotiation and you call a timeout, observe that individual's reaction. Well, why are you saying that? Well, because X, Y, Z. And in posing the question of or thought that we're nowhere near the point where we should be, or however you choose to phrase it, and verbiage is important also, by observing that individual's reactions, you can get some perspective, some insight per their thought process, and exactly what it is that they may do as a result of you using the takeaway strategy. The takeaway strategy is one whereby someone feels as though they have something in hand almost, and then all of a sudden it's being taken away from them. It's a very strong tactic to keep people engaged in a negotiation. But even more so, the reason why at that 75% mark that you should consider stepping back from the negotiation table, the longer you stay engaged in a negotiation, the more committed you become to it psychologically, and at the same time, you are much more likely to make unnecessary concessions. Why? Because, hey, I've been engaged this long. I have got to see this to its conclusion, and you will start to make unnecessary concessions. So there's a whole mental aspect that one has to be mindful of when they are entering a negotiation, going through the process. And like I said, if you think you're not near where you should be, towards the end of where you thought the end would be, you got to find a way to get out.
Yeah, excellent. I come across what I call the 3 T's of dynamite when I'm conversing with people around negotiation, and they're the 3 words: technique, tactics, and tools. And when I hear this, these 3 words are quite emotive, because people who typically don't like negotiation see that as they see them as tools of manipulation, right? When you hear, okay, we're going to use this tactic, these tools, and these techniques, it kind of lends itself to a manipulative approach to communication. Where do you shake out with that?
Well, first of all, words have meanings that are different to different people.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I can say, well, I'm not going to manipulate you. Now, you may have noticed the body language gesture, tossing it aside. Say, no, I'm not really going to manipulate you. Or how about, I am not going to manipulate you. I'm actually saying in the affirmative with the body language, I am going to manipulate you. So let's put that to the side for a moment.
right.
Words are so important per how someone perceives them, and therefore, as a negotiator, you have to be attuned to exactly what words mean to the entity with whom you're negotiating. I could say, the sky is cloudy. Now, what exactly does that mean? To what degree is it cloudy? Is it overcast? But if I understand you to use the verbiage, the sky is cloudy, and that means there are a few gray clouds in the sky or something of that nature, I understand the gist of what you're saying. So match verbiage from a mirroring perspective to the degree that you are aligned with the other individual. If someone uses the word, Greg, I think you're trying to manipulate me, and I want to bond with that individual, I might say something along the lines of, now here comes the mirroring aspect, Tony, why do you think I'm trying to manipulate you? And then I'm going to get your perspective for what the word manipulation means, number one, per what you respond by telling me your meaning of manipulation. Let's use the opposite of that. I want to break a bond with you because you're a bully type of negotiator. I might say something along the lines of, Tony, you think I'm trying to manipulate you? That's interesting because I have the same perspective of what you're trying to do. So who's manipulating whom in this particular situation, and why do you think it's occurring, Tony? Now, you noticed I got a little more aggressive because, again, you're a bully type negotiator with this scenario, and I'm basically saying to you, not only through verbiage, through words, I'm using the same words, and I may be mimicking your actions also, but leaning in. You've heard the expression, get out of my face, or something of that
Yeah.
nature. Yeah, I'm actually saying you're not intimidating me either with what you're doing. So please, okay. Now, so let's stop the manipulation and tell me, by the way, what word you would like to use to talk about a more amicable form of negotiation. Now I'm reshifting the paradigm and the position of the negotiation, and at the same time, I'm offering you the opportunity mentally to not use the word manipulation and instead, in this particular situation, use a word that's softer than manipulation.
So is it, I mean, I'm one of those people actually that don't like the word manipulation, and I also tend to use like words like approaches as opposed to like a technique or a tool. Maybe tool works for me, but technique just seems too prescribed for me. And so in a situation like that, what you're saying is that the word manipulation is a trigger for me. For other people, it might not be a trigger. For other people, it might just be just a word that goes over their head. But for me, it's a trigger. And so during the conversation, you would highlight that you are aware that this is a trigger, and you might even delve deeper to find out what's behind that, or you might just offer me another word to use so that we don't get stuck in the mud. Is that, yeah?
Yes, and let's
Right.
say discerning the fact that manipulation is a trigger for you, and
Yeah.
I want to push back hard on you just as
Right.
a ploy, a tactic.
Right.
I can then say, Tony, why in the world why are you trying to manipulate me? Now, I'm playing the victim part in
Right.
this
Right.
particular scenario, and I'm going to observe your reaction because I know that's a trigger word for you from a negative perspective. And I'm now implying you're using it against me. Tony, don't be so hard on me. Is the
Right.
subliminal message that's being conveyed also. You may notice the tonality that I used to convey those sentiments. Tonality plays a very important part as part of the verbal, nonverbal aspect that goes into body language and the negotiation process too.
Fantastic. So I've seen you on CNN and I've seen you on Fox, and these are traditionally two opposing camps. So I just wonder, how does your message change, or how do you adapt your message when you're talking to these audiences?
Anytime, and I've run for political office also, and
Okay.
I say that to say, anytime you are in any environment, someone is going to attempt to control you in that environment. Goes back to planning. So you know exactly what it is that you want to deliver. You know the message that you want to deliver. You know how you wish to be perceived. Thus, you know how to position yourself for that to occur. In some cases, you're there to deliver a message and a question comes out of left
Yeah.
field
Yeah.
about a particular political candidate or something of that nature. Even if you oppose that candidate or if you support the candidate, you're still there to deliver your message. Well, that's a very important question that you raised, Tony. And let me tell you about it's called the block and bridge. Bridge to the topic that you really want to talk about anyway, and or how you are going to put your perspective, your spin on a particular question. Only once only once. And I always tell people when I'm interviewed, first of all, when you're interviewed on TV, you don't get questions ahead of time at all.
Right.
And I tell people in a non TV interview process or format, I do not want to know questions ahead of time because I pride myself on being able to speak on anything related to negotiation and reading body language. And only once have I ever been, let's say, thumped by a question that someone posed to me, and it just happened to be my developmental editor that works with me on book projects. And I asked her, "What was that question?" And she said, "I don't remember, Greg." But to answer your question more directly, know what you want to talk about, know how you wish to be perceived, know how you're going to project yourself, stay on point. So yes, CNN, Fox, two different networks, two different perspectives, and still, the perspective that I'm going to show up with is mine. Well, you're not answering the question, Greg. Well, why do you think that? Now, here's the other aspect of that, what I just highlighted. The person asking questions is the person controlling an environment at any one given point in time because that individual is literally getting more input per how that other entity is thinking and where that other entity proposes to take the conversation, the negotiation, etc. So you don't have to answer a question just because someone poses it to you. Now, the way you sidestep that, though, is very important, especially at a negotiation, because someone may say, well, I'm asking the question because it's very important to me. And I would say, well, why is it important to you? What have I done? I'm throwing yet another question right back at them. And if they say, because XYZ, they've given me more insight and information also. So just
Yeah.
be mindful of where you are and how you respond.
Great. Yeah, I like that. Just because a question's answered, you don't have to ask, you don't have to answer it. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
good point. So I saw, we're on the subject of questions. I saw a video and there was a specific type of question that you use, which I loved. It was called the assumptive question. Can you share with our listeners what is an assumptive question and how you use them?
Right. So, Tony, you're aware of what assumptive questions are, correct? And there's the example right there. And of course,
Fantastic.
you're astute enough that you realize exactly what was going. An assumptive question can jump over the question of, well, Tony, do you want to settle at $1,000, or, well, Tony, you will settle at 1,000, won't you? So it jumps
Right.
over an unnecessary question to get deeper into a point and to also, once again, lead a perspective in the negotiation, reshape a perspective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. An assumptive question assumes that something has already occurred, and or it can also be used to imply that you may know more than you are disclosing. So if someone says, well, we can't conclude this $1 million contract, and I might say, well, how did you conclude it before? The assumption being it was concluded before.
Right,
And the
right.
person goes, well, what do you mean? Or something like that. And again, you can pick up information based on how they respond, how they answer the question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of mental, let's call it psychology, that goes into negotiation also, that's involved, wrapped around, wrapped in the tactics that you use per
Mm,
the strategy you wish to employ throughout a negotiation.
wow. I mean, you're just dropping pearls everything that comes out of your mouth, right? Um, so I've got another question. And this is more about you and your approach. When I approached you, it took about 6 months for you to finally agree, and you I think I sent you several emails. Then you sent me an email back finally, and asked me specifically who I was, who my audience was, and what I found is that you were respectfully assertive about your time and you
Mhm.
and where you put yourself. Is this like a learned behavior, or is this you naturally? Tell me a bit about that as an approach, because I didn't feel offended in any way, but I felt this is a person who respects themselves and respects their time, and I think that's also a good approach to have in negotiations.
Well, it definitely is. And with me, it is a learned behavior. Why? Time is the most precious asset that all of us have. And to the degree that you allow someone to control your time, they control you. Plus that, Tony, and this is not to boast or anything of that nature, I get a lot of requests
Mm.
for interviews to do this, that, and the other. And truth be known, some would pull me into the to a morass if I wasn't careful, because again, people have their own agenda, and there are agendas that I do not wish to be a part of, and thus, again, in order to plan appropriately, you need to have as much input as you possibly can before walking into any environment, and thus, hey, the more you know, the better you can plan. The better you plan, the more prepared you can be for what occurs in the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
And I've negotiated with multi-million dollar organizations on their behalf, governments throughout the world, some associations, organizations that have three initials in it, in governmental environments. I'll leave it at that. So, once again, you just have to know who you are per what you're trying to achieve and what someone else may be seeking from you before you actually step too far into their environment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you about the type of negotiations that you get that you get involved in on a daily basis. Um, but I want to tie this in because we're coming towards the end. But I'd like to tie this in with the body of your work. So maybe if you could share with us the type of negotiations that you tend to get involved in, or that you have been involved in, and then I'd like you to also open up about physiognomics, because this is I've never heard of this term before, and I wonder whether you can relate the two and share that with us.
Well, the way or the negotiations that I get involved in literally are across the spectrum. I've negotiated on behalf of Hollywood directors, um, high net worth organizations, top 50 corporations throughout the world, and all of those are different types of
Mhm.
negotiations. Now, the tactics and strategies that you use in one environment may not necessarily work in another, so I've learned more through the engagement of negotiations. Physiognomics, as you pronounced it a moment ago, is a science, and it's somewhat of a so-so science at this particular point in time. Some say it's not a science at all, that can read aspects of your face based on real facial features that you were born with. And it's like, oh, is it real? Is it
Mm.
not? Type of thing. But again, in order to expand my knowledge base, I have delved into multiple avenues of negotiation and body language in order to become more well rounded about that which I possess, number one, and then that which I can convey to other individuals.
Well,
Now, Tony, real fast.
yeah,
Notice one thing I did avoid there. Didn't talk
yeah.
about the three initial type of negotiations that I went into. It's always important to pay attention to what people don't say, because that can also give you more insight as to what they're trying to protect and or shield themselves from. Just FYI.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got the impression you didn't want to go into that online, but
Uh-huh.
you and I are going to have a talk offline. So don't.
Okay. Now you
You know.
pique the interest of the listeners or viewers too.
Well, they'll go and they'll connect with you and buy your books. I also wanted to just ask you the moniker, Master Negotiator. That's something that kind of fits you well. I just wondered how did you come about that as a title?
Oh my goodness, let me tell you. I'm also a member of the National Speakers Association and 100 Coaches. 100 Coaches are individuals that coach individuals such as Venus Williams, the Saudi royal family, high net worth, and Richard Bronson, those type of individuals. When I was early on in my career with the National Speakers Association, someone that was really senior said to me, "You have to distinguish yourself. How
Mm.
can you distinguish yourself?" And I said, "Well, I really like talking about negotiations." And he said, "Well, how about putting negotiation, something about negotiation, in your title?" And I thought, okay, Master Negotiator. Well, that moniker was taken. The Master Negotiator was the next one that came about. And you mentioned Fox News earlier. I was a Fox News contributor for a while, and since I knew a lot about body language, Fox News started branding me as a body language expert. Someone said, "Hey, they give it, you take it," like that. So that's how the
Nice.
moniker came about.
No, and it sticks. It works.
Yes,
It
yes.
definitely
And
piques the interest.
yeah, and one other thing too, when I was a kid, my mother always told me, "You're always negotiating." That became my tagline.
Yeah. And can you with when it comes to reading body language, do you ever switch off, or is is this something are you forever just taking in information from your surroundings?
Tony, excellent question. There are times when I will relax my mind and yet I'll still subliminally catch something. And we all catch signals from time to time. And those subliminal signals will percolate to a higher level in my thought process like, whoa, what did I just see? Even when I'm off, as you might term it. So it's something, the more you do it, the more you become attuned to the environment that you're in.
Right.
And it's something that to turn off, I really do not want to turn it completely off because
Yeah.
then I miss valuable factors that are occurring around me.
Super. Greg, tell us about your books. Tell us about your material. I mean, I'm really interested. It just reminds me of a big fat turkey, and I just want to eat it. I just want to consume as much as I can. Tell us about your work.
Well, it's interesting. I've written 7 books, and the last two, Body Language Secrets to Win More Negotiations and Negotiating with a Bully. Interestingly enough, negotiating with a bully never did that well in the United States, but did fantastically well throughout the rest of the world. And I thought, huh, interesting, which gave me insights about a particular culture also. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Body Language Secrets to Win More Negotiations delves into exactly what one can observe through the gestures emitted by those with whom they are engaged to understand more about how to negotiate better and what to do with a particular strategy and tactic, or I should say tactics that add up to strategies in any one given set of circumstances. And here's something else that I would truly suggest your listeners be very much aware of. Tactics and strategies you use today may work perfectly well in that environment. Trying to use the same tactics and strategies tomorrow may not do so, simply because every environment is different and you impact one environment versus how you react in another, which is why my motto is you're always negotiating.
And yeah, that's so true. My approach to negotiation is quite similar. Is you cannot go in with a pre-conditioned plan because you don't know what the other side will do. And if they throw you a curveball, and then your whole plan goes out of the window. So it's important to be able to be flexible and to know yourself and to know the skills that you have. But also within that plan, you have to have a level of flexibility. Otherwise, one jack move, one left-hand side move, and you've lost your plan goes out of the window.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Tony, if anyone wants free content, and I love giving away stuff for free, they can go to my website, which is the, T-H-E, Master, M-A-S-T-E-R,
Yeah.
Negotiator, negotiator.com, he said, or reach me at Greg, G-R-E-G, at themasternegotiator.com. I respect people's time. I ask that they respect mine, but I'm always willing to be there if someone needs more insights about negotiation and reading body language.
And that's fantastic. And you'll see Greg is actually listed as one of the top negotiators in the world. You'll find him put his name into Google. He comes up everywhere. And there will be full details on the show notes where we'll put links to Greg's work, to his books, and also to his LinkedIn. Greg Williams, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us at Empathy at the Table. It's been a real pleasure. I knew it would be, and this has not been in any way, shape, a disappointment. It's been a complete pleasure. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Tony. Thank you again for the invitation.